Ready? Good evening. The November 19th meeting of the Palm Springs Sustainability Commission is called to order. The first item on the agenda is the roll call, but before we do that, I'd like to announce that T. Santora has submitted his resignation to the commission. We thank him for all of the input that he's made so far. Sorry to see him go. Dan, would you take the roll call, please?
Sure. Chair Clark.
Present.
Vice Chair McCann.
Present.
Commissioner Baker.
Here.
Commissioner Flanagan.
Here.
Commissioner Friedman.
Here.
Commissioner Futterman.
Here.
Commissioner Garrett.
Here.
Commissioner Gauthier.
Here.
Commissioner Goins.
Here.
Commissioner Miller.
Here.
We have a quorum. All
you.
present.
Okay. The next item is acceptance of the agenda. The agenda was emailed to all of you and posted on Thursday, November 14th, which is per the city policy. Is there a motion to accept and second? Is there a motion to accept the agenda?
So moved.
Commissioner Baker, a second?
Second.
Commissioner Flanagan, thank you. Any discussion on the agenda? If not, all in favor of accepting the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say no. Acceptance of the agenda passes. Thank you. Okay. The next item on the agenda is city manager and staff comments. Patrick?
All right, I will be brief today. So just a recap of some of the previous and upcoming council meetings. October 23rd, I did a brief presentation on SB 1383 to give the council a heads up that more was coming on that front. There was a second reading of the No Dogs on Trails ordinance, and it passed. There was a request for the city to identify or to create a trail in the city for dogs, and so we are looking into that. The November 6th meeting, the solar zoning code was adopted, and the only request that emerged from that was that the city work on some guidelines for review and approval of things that come to the city for special review as part of that process. So we're going to work with planning on guidelines for that. December 4th, upcoming meeting, there's nothing that I know of except for potentially some comments about the tribal arena. There's a staff report that's currently under development on that, which leads me to my point number 2. The arena report was issued and it was posted on the city's website. We still, to my knowledge, have not received the appendices to that report, which includes a greenhouse gas emissions inventory and another environmental report. What was it? Water report. So we had requested those, I believe, and so I was checking again today to see if that we received them, and I do not believe that we have. I was informed today that the staff report is under development and it will go in likely tomorrow or Thursday, and planning is leading that effort. So the comments, if we have them, if I get them in, I can get them into the staff report in the next day or two. Otherwise, there will be an opportunity for public comment. I believe on December 5th, there's a public meeting that's being hosted. And so folks who should feel free to attend that meeting and provide comments. A few points to note is that one is that the report essentially says that there is no environmental impact, despite this large building being developed, as well as all of the car traffic that is going to result from that. It does have some summary information, I believe, in the report to give you some sense of how many trips and all that may occur. So if you have any concerns about that, I highly recommend that you make some comments at the public meeting about that, and we'll try to get what we can into the staff report as well. So that's what I would say on that. And then the last point was we did receive notification and confirmation that the Dce Launch will be in April of this next year. So that was way ahead of schedule based on our earlier understanding, which is that it was going to be delayed until the fall. And so now SCE is not moving forward with their billing changes until later next year or even the following year. So they're going to let the community choice aggregate folks move forward earlier in the year. So be looking for lots of communication and more information about that as we go forward here. Again, that's the option. Basically, the city is moving forward with the 100% green power option, and so that it will be the default for everybody, and then they can opt down or opt out as they see fit. So that's the message that we're going to be getting out to folks, and more on that later on in the agenda. So I think that was it for my comments at this time.
Any questions or comments for Patrick? Thank you. Now we'll move on to public comments. This is the time for members of the public to address the Sustainability Commission on agenda items and items of general interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Commission. The Commission values your comments, but pursuant to the Brown Act, cannot take action on items not listed on the posted agenda. 3 minutes are assigned for each speaker. Is there anyone here for public comments? I guess not. So we'll move on then to the meeting minutes. Just like the agenda, the meeting minutes from the Thursday, November 14th meeting were posted and emailed. They were posted and emailed on November 14th, the minutes from the October 15th meeting. And is there a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
Commissioner Baker? Is there a second? Second. Commissioner Miller, thank you. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Okay, no discussion. So all in favor of accepting the meeting minutes, please say aye. 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 Opposed, say no.
I'll abstain.
And one abstention. Thank you. Okay. Now we'll move to the recycling report with Gary.
Good evening. Briefly, we had our shred and e-waste event on October 18th in conjunction with Palm Springs Disposal's fall cleanup. Desert Arc collected the e-waste for us. They got a completely full truck. We had 262 vehicles come through, which is pretty good, so it must have been well advertised. Desert Arc has also picked up 2 loads of e-waste that have been collecting over the summer in the public works yard, and now they have enough people in the Palm Springs area to set up a regular schedule, so we'll do that on a monthly basis. They'll come by on a set day and pick it up every month. We have been visiting the non-compliant businesses downtown, and to date we visited 54. We haven't had the success that we were hoping for, but we'll keep plugging along. Visiting the businesses isn't the only real purpose of doing that. The secondary purpose is it satisfies the state's requirement to show that the city has put forth a good faith effort in case these people remain non-compliant. They won't necessarily, they'll probably come back and have some comments, but it'll be hard pressed for them to do anything more than just to have some uncomplimentary comments, because we have shown a good faith effort. The other aspect that we've added to this is Public Works has identified 5 vendors that have been putting their materials left over at the end of the day in the street trash can rather than the appropriate cans in the rear of their buildings, and it has resulted in one Public Works employee getting injured and off for a week. So as I'm out there, I've been addressing that, and I will continue to monitor that. There were no numbers received from SA Recycling or Desert Recycling this month yet, so I'll report on those next month when we receive them. Be happy to answer any questions you have. Yes?
On these non-compliant businesses, is this for kitchen waste? Oh, sorry. The non-compliant businesses, is it for kitchen waste? I mean, is it for the green waste?
A small portion of it is the organics, but the largest portion of the number is for the commercial businesses.
Is it like,
Commercial recycling.
okay, all
right.
right. Like cardboard?
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, gotcha. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Is there any possibility of citing folks for non-compliance to sort of encourage them?
Well-
That's one question. And then second is that, is there outreach, or I think I know the answer to that, but has there been recent outreach to Main Street, Joy Brown Meredith's group, to sort of let folks know what's going on? So those are my two questions.
Well, I'll answer the first one, and maybe Patrick can answer the second one. What was your first question? I'm sorry.
Citations for non-compliance with
Oh.
what seems to be a code violation.
I don't, with SB 1383 coming down the road, that may change, but right now, there isn't anything in place, any ordinance or anything in place that would allow us to go out and take that course of action. And I would tend to think that that may be down the path, but we aren't there right now.
And I have reached out to Joy at Main Street to do some sort of a waste management and recycling brown bag with the Main Street folks. We had talked about it late in the summer, and I followed up with her to see if we could schedule time for that. I have not heard back. And so Chris and I are on top of that, but haven't heard anything back from them. So, yeah.
Anything else, Gary?
No, that's it. Thank you. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to old business. The first item on the agenda is the Climate Action Plan Roadmap. We started discussion of that at the last meeting, and Patrick has prepared a draft roadmap along with a memo with a request for comments. I'll turn it over to Patrick.
So I'm not sure why. I feel like these were a lot more flexible before. So based on our last conversation about what to do in response to council requests to have more information about what we're doing on the climate action front, we talked last time about developing some sort of a climate action roadmap that basically described what we're currently doing and then what we would hope to do in the future as part in a way to educate them about all the stuff that's already happening, but also to put in front of them some ideas that they could then support going forward and perhaps provide some more resources for, especially. So anyway, so what I tried to do was try to start into that roadmap based on some of the information that we had put forward last time. And it's my understanding that this roadmap would likely have some sort of acknowledgement of the current crisis. So I included that piece in there, and we can certainly expand on that. Goals and plans, so kind of describe where we are or what we know about what we've committed to. Unfortunately, as mentioned in here, we have not done any sort of an update to any of those or reassessment of those recently. So we don't really have a good sense of where we are with those. We can do a little bit more of an analysis of the climate action plan to see if there are things in there that we can definitely report out that have been done. But other than that, we don't have a greenhouse gas inventory to tell us where we're at overall. And then past and ongoing activities, I thought it would be worthwhile to reiterate some of the stuff that we've already done since that 2010 timeframe where the greenhouse gas inventory was performed. Some of that is mentioned in the sustainability plan, and I think that it can be culled together from other reports as well. So mostly because so much had been done right away in the early 2010 timeframe, the 2010 to 2015. So it's important that we note that and take credit for that. And then talk about maybe some of the things that are ongoing, like the leaf blower ordinance implementation and things like that that are also helpful. And then talk about roadmap for future actions. And so I organized this into two sections. One is near-term actions and the other is longer-term actions. So there are some things that we've already been talking about and already been researching. So I put those in kind of the near-term section. And then some of the other stuff that might require ordinance changes and some longer-term actions, then I put those into the longer-term action section. and tried to mention a couple of things that we're still investigating and still researching. And so anyway, so that's certainly a preliminary list of things, both on the near term and the long term. So certainly interested if you've got any additional ideas of things that we should either be considering or things that we are already doing that I just forgot to include. So, yeah.
I think it's time for a new inventory.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's number one on my list of near-term actions. Yep, Rob.
Go ahead.
Actually, I'm going right to David's bailiwick on this question. So the one stat that just jumped out at me from that 2010 review was the tiny, tiny fraction of our electrical consumption that was being accounted for by solar back then. And how much of our electrical consumption is accounting for our greenhouse gas emissions. It's a huge percentage. So my point is simply, since 2010, that would be a great metric to sort of apply to see how much better we're doing now with all of the solar stuff that's been going on.
I have really good news about that because about a week ago, some consultant group published a list of the 100 most solar cities in the country, and Palm Springs was roughly somewhere between 25 and 30. Patrick, I will get you that statistic because it says that we've obviously had a lot of uptick. And also, Patrick, you can get from building, we had gotten it about 2 or 3 years ago when we were looking at the solar materials, but they do have a statistic of all of the installed panels. So it may not be in kilowatt hours, but it's certainly number of rooftops. And we were already past 10% last time, and I think we're closer between 15 and 20%. And what Patrick is reflected in his memo, and also in the memo that I prepared that's attached to the Solar Green Building, is that we are, and certainly with the advantage of the Dce launch coming in April as opposed to later in the year, we are going to be looking at a proposal that I mentioned last month that would require all commercial buildings or certain categories of commercial buildings, TBD, and as we work through it, to use 100% renewable sources. The easiest way for them to do it is essentially stay on the DCE 100% carbon free. So that would substantially drop that. And the statistic that I had mentioned last time or a few times ago that we got from CVAG is that reduces our GHG emissions by 28% roughly. So those are some really good things, that we can be looking at. The one comment that I really did want to make, Patrick, that you can reflect in the memo, and this was discussed in the Energy Commission discussions on workshop on 2022 building code, which they're already working on, is that the real goal and the hard part is 80% reduction below 1990 by 2045. So the easiest part is probably 2020, which we may already have satisfied, and carbon neutrality, which we're getting closer to. But the 80% and the efforts to wring out basically carbon from the state are a challenge, and the building code, which is noted in your memo, will really every 3 years get continually ratcheted up to make, to essentially make new buildings at least carbon free.
Right. And I think, and this is potentially something to add on the longer term actions is, and especially this arena project sort of hits home in some ways, that in addition to looking at all of these things, I think we need to be conscious of growth and figuring out how to manage that growth in a way that addresses these types of impacts right up front, as opposed to trying to retrofit them or coming in later on to do something about them. So thinking about not only the building codes, but there are other things like, for instance, that we can do to manage the traffic component of growth as opposed to just maybe the building portion. So, yeah.
DWA is working with the state to get a per capita kind of metric that can be used in their water consumption, and perhaps some of their mathematics could be transposed to a per capita sort of greenhouse emission use that would make sense to not only us, but the public as well.
Okay.
I should say, they haven't gotten it back from the state yet, and it has been a while, so don't hold your breath.
Okay.
Just a quick follow-up to the water. Another source of greenhouse gas emissions that jumped out at me from this report was the wastewater treatment plant. And since 2010, I'm assuming that it is after that they got their own solar farm. Right, so that should be helping quite a bit here.
It's not quite the same.
And our wastewater treatment doesn't recover any methane, like a lot of many
So
do.
I think
Not clear why.
right, the emissions that you're referring to are from the process, not from the energy use necessarily. I'm sure it's a
I thought
combination.
they were from the
I'm sure it's a
energy use.
combination, but there's also a huge greenhouse gas emission from
Right,
the
from the
process.
process, yeah.
In a lot of cities, they recover all that methane and they're net zero usage, and so it's not
Right,
clear
and
why
that's-
we don't.
We've included that in our list, but the water group is also looking into that.
Ashley Metzger and I and one of the engineers from DWA took a tour of the sewage treatment plant last Friday. We got a lot of really, really good information. It's going to take me a while to kind of put it all in all of its categories, but there are many things that we can do to bring wastewater treatment as a concept even to the public. It's always been, something that they took care of, but now we need to bring it forward and get people to understand it and participate in it more.
All right, so if you've got any other edits or thoughts in terms of what should be included in that memo, let me know. I'll revise it and add a little more, flesh it out a little bit more in the coming weeks. And so hopefully we'll have that ready to go as a communication to council either at the probably at the January meeting, most likely.
Thank you.
So.
Commissioner Goins?
I did have one additional comment. So was this climate action plan in relation to Christie's meeting with us, where in part one of the things she discussed was what is the most efficient way for us to communicate with council? Or was this a unrelated effort?
So it's not quite related to that.
Okay.
Yeah, so this was just specifically with regard to her request for knowing more about where we were with regard to the climate action plan.
Okay.
And so, and this was one way that we suggested that we could at least inform the council about what's happening on that front. I think there was a broader question about how the commission should interact with the council moving forward. And I think that's a topic for
Right, yeah, we'll get to
discussion.
that later in the agenda.
And then my second question was regarding the scope of the action plan. So I couldn't find the 2010 action plan. I could only find the 2005 action plan. But historically, those plans the scope has been emissions that the city itself produced, so things like the wastewater treatment plant, employee commutes, things like that. But we're talking about things outside of that scope. And so I just wanted I just want to be clear that is our intent here. When we
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the greenhouse gas emissions inventory is everything within the city limit. So it's residential as well as city operations and et cetera, so business operations. So the new inventory that we do will also address the whole, basically everything that goes on within the city boundary, as well as it has calculations for all the waste that we send off-site.
So then if it includes everything that would happen within city boundaries, then it probably should include things like single-person car trips or
It
other
does.
kinds
It
of
does.
transit.
It did.
Okay.
Yeah, the 2010
Great.
one was much
Yeah.
more comprehensive than just municipal.
Yeah, and I sent that around, I think, with the last meeting packet.
Yes.
Yeah.
With the last meeting packet.
Yep.
Okay, I haven't
Should
seen
be
that.
in there.
Along that, can you include like a pie chart just overall where kind of things kind of go? I know when I've done greenhouse gas inventories, transportation fuel and jet fuel and shipping took more than like half
So,
of everything, just to get an
yeah.
idea of what we're looking at, because we're obviously, even though the airport is in Palm Springs, jet fuel's not in it. All the truck stops that pick up all the trucks in the 10 probably are in the city limits, but I don't think those are in it.
Right.
And the windmills are all in the city too, but I'm not sure if that's in it. So just a high-level
Right.
clarification of what we're
So,
looking at.
yeah, so I think those are all good questions, and I don't know the details behind what went into the 2010 inventory. I don't know that I saw anything in there about jet fuel in particular.
There was not. It
yeah.
did not include aircraft taking
Yeah.
off in particular. That was,
Yeah, which is interesting, and I'm
Yeah.
not sure why it would not have included that, but that's something we could investigate for the next one.
We did it for when I did Hawaii's, and it's just way, it belittles all the housing sector, all the housing sector quite a bit,
Yeah.
but I don't know how you account for it, but just as long as you have a little pie chart, just showing what you're looking at.
Again, it's in the 2010 plan, and I think it was pretty much housing and buildings were basically the biggest contributor, followed by transportation. I think was the next biggest wedge. So,
Commissioner Miller? Question?
Just a little clarification,
Yep.
for those of you who haven't read that in a while. They have the whole city, including, everybody and everything, and then they have the municipal part of it. And so the municipal part is actually included in the whole, but then they have the municipal part separately. So they break it down, and it's quite a lot of breakdown. It's nice, very nice.
all right. The next topic that we wanted to cover for old business is about the potential changes to the plastic ordinance. So I think as you guys have all maybe learned from our last conversation about this, this is an evolving conversation. And we're learning new stuff all the time. And I think also, as I had mentioned, we were bringing on board a consultant called Upstream. They have been helping lots of cities move towards plastics reduction ordinances and also move more towards reuse. And so I had an initial call with them at the end of October and had a follow-up call with them just last week. And so they've been helping provide some draft text for the ordinance, have really pushed me in terms of questions about why are we doing certain things and how are we doing certain things. So it's been really, really helpful. Related to this, I gave a presentation a couple of weeks ago at the CVAG Technical Working Group meeting on this topic to just let other desert cities know what we were doing. The quick takeaway from that is that nobody else is doing anything, and nor do they necessarily intend to, although they are interested in what's happening here. And so there may be some interest in perhaps something on the polystyrene front. But nobody had any current plans to do anything with this topic. So that's one thing. Second thing was I did a second presentation to the Energy Environment Committee, also along the same lines of just letting them know what we were doing. But this was after I talked to our consultant as well. So I revised my story a little bit. And so that's the story I want to present to you guys today to just get your feedback and reactions to some of the stuff that some new thoughts. And Lisa Middleton was there. And so she kind of got a little bit of information on it. And I think it was also interesting, the reaction from, and this is a group of elected officials, by the way, that there was a lot of questions about how this is going to impact the business community and the economic impact and things like that. So lots of concern about that from the other cities. And Lisa mentioned that most of the feedback that she's gotten is, why aren't we doing more? So anyway, so that's an interesting perspective on the perhaps the difference in the cities. So do you have the presentation? Yeah. There you go. All right. So one of the things we worked on a little bit was the title. So Non-Reusable Plastics Reduction Ordinance, I think is what we landed on. So that's our name du jour. And again, it tries to reinforce this idea of reuse is really the best answer to some of these challenges. This is what I just mentioned in terms of the couple of meetings that I've had. So I won't go through that again. I did want to mention that we've done about 77 surveys of restaurants. Interestingly, 50 already have reusable for on-site food use, and so I thought that was pretty good, a pretty good number. 8 don't have any seating, so we can take 8 away from that 77 number. And then the other number to note was that 26 of those 77 still use polystyrene. So about a third of them still use polystyrene. So here are some suggested changes since our last meeting. So the first one, and this is actually, when I go back to the original staff report that I did back in June, it's pretty consistent with that. So the first idea is to adopt a phased approach. So phase 1 would potentially require reusable products for on-site use unless it's not possible. So that would be like places that can't wash dishes, places that don't have any seating, all that kind of stuff. Maybe square footage limitations, that kind of thing. So unless you can't do it, use reusables on site. Reduce disposables through an on-request only or service area requirement, which we talked about last time. Eliminate polystyrene foodware, food vendors, and retail outlets as well. So again, focusing on the elimination of polystyrene. Then the new components to this is, one is define reusable as reused on site. So one of the interesting conversations that I was having with the consultant was that there is a barbecue restaurant in town that has serves their beverages in very sturdy plastic cups that you basically take off site and you can use them and reuse them. But then we got into this discussion of, is that a reusable foodware? And so I said, well, I'm not sure, because you can reuse it, but it's not being reused on site. And so people could just throw that in the trash, most likely. And so anyway, so that's where we came up with the clarification on this definition of reusable, is to make it clear that it's meant to be reused on site. So that's one clarification. Then the other discussion we had was about charging for disposable items. So this is, again, one that I had included originally in the text, and then when it went to the lawyers, they took it out because the way that I had written it, it was a fee that basically came back to the city and they couldn't use it. It would basically be a tax. And so this would actually be something that would go to the vendor to presumably use towards offsetting costs of other materials and that kind of thing. But it's a disposable item and not necessarily a plastics item, so just further encouraging reuse. So they provided me with some text on that, so I'll include that in the next round. And then the big new one is to stay silent on what is acceptable for now. So this goes back to our dilemma that we had with regard to advocating for a particular product. We know that there are no good answers. So compostable, and the thing that turned the conversation with regard to my conversation with the consultant was, she said, oh, well, you must have a robust composting system. And I said, no, in fact, we don't. And she said, well, why would you make people spend the extra money to switch to these products if you have no way to capture them and do something with them other than send them to a landfill? And I said, that is an excellent question. Isn't the answer because it's better than sending plastic to a landfill? And her response was, not necessarily. And so she's going to provide me with some additional backup information on that so that we can convey that message a little more clearly. And then we had the conversation about recyclables, the fact that they are things that are recyclable aren't necessarily recycled, and so there's a disconnect with specifying that. So I think we could, in fact, provide some guidance to people. So if for example, all the people that are going to switch from polystyrene, we could make recommendations to them to move towards more environmentally preferred products, in particular 1s and 2 plastics, because at least, if they gave those to people for take home, they could wipe it out and put it in their recycling bin. So we know that. And so anyway, so we could give some guidance on that and perhaps work with them to give a little information when they give those takeaway items out that just says, hey, if you clean this out, you can put this in the recycling bin. So anyway, so there's some potential there, I think, for some communication and some more clarity around that front. So anyway, so this is phase one. Yes, question.
So up until Commissioner Miller informed me about the recycling numbers and stuff, I don't think the average consumer understands the difference between 1 and 2 versus 3 to 7.
Right.
Because they see the little arrows saying, oh, this is recyclable, and throw it into the blue container. So I think some education has to happen as well.
Completely agree. And that's the other reason for kind of moving people in this direction is you can start that conversation. And at least if all the vendors are on board with moving to 1s and 2s, they won't even have to think about it. And you can just say that, hey, put this in your recycling bin. So,
But the
Yes.
PSDS website does have that information. And so
yeah, so I'll get to that too, is we're trying to revise some of our web materials too to make sure that's clearer. So then we get to phase 2, and then that's perhaps where we define what is acceptable. And so this is, again, more forward-looking to when we have SB 1383 in place, and we do have actually a composting program in place on the residential level and on the business level in a more robust way. So we may have more opportunities to capture that stuff in a stream and actually do something with it. And so, anyway, so wait till then to define what is acceptable. And again, there's the other reason is that there is still a state bill that is in the works to define these things. So a lot of them went away this year. They didn't get signed. The single-use plastic stuff did not get signed, but there is one that's still alive that is working on better defining all of these terms and what is acceptable. So they're going through the process of coming up to a negotiated agreement about what items are acceptable and what does it mean for something to be compostable, what does it mean for something to be recyclable, et cetera. And one of the things that's interesting that I was reading in their last thing was about further defining recyclable as something that there is a readily available market for. So it's not like some of the other plastics that we know that aren't going anywhere or we have a really hard time for, but really making sure that it's clear that something that is recyclable has an end market for it. And so anyway, so these are just a list of why I think that this may make sense to defer stuff that's acceptable. And I also think it gives us a chance to focus on the reuse concept and see where that goes, so. Without a lot of resistance from people saying, oh my God, you're going to have me, spend 3 times as much on a container. So, yes.
I have just 2 questions. If you put compostables into the recyclable process, does it gum up the machinery? Okay.
Yeah.
And then I also thought part of the reason we do like compostables are for things that don't enter into the waste stream, and what stuff that ends up either in lakes and oceans and streets, they'll just degrade on their own rather than, is that negligible?
Right. So that's the dilemma that I've always had with this, is that if you're trying to target litter, it's better to have something that's going to degrade than it is to have a piece of plastic. And so that's why I think that conversation still needs to be had, and we still need to move in that direction. But I think that having a market or having an infrastructure to manage those compostables will help with that discussion about why we're moving in that direction too. So, yeah. David and then John.
Our neighbor had a our fall party this past Saturday, and I was talking with one of the bartenders, and the caterer does a lot of events at my house. And so it sounds from their definitions that the catering community would not be subject to the ordinance, and I probably could understand why, because there would not be any facility for reuse, and probably not going to ask the homeowner to do that. That being said, can we work on sort of educational material so that they know what products are sort of preferred?
Right.
So that they can, I would like to sort of tell my caterer who does 5 or 6 events at my house, okay, here's the list of products that you can buy, and they're better than, straight old plastics that are, just going to go straight to the landfill.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that does 2 things. One is it gets the information out there into the community in a little different way, right? And so anyway, so that's great. And the other thing I'm thinking with this in terms of implementation timeframe is that I wanted to avoid a big tiered approach to things, but I do think it makes sense that if we put forward the restrictions on polystyrene within like a 6-month period, and then do the reusables within the year, it gives us a good opportunity to really educate, develop some incentive programs, figuring out how to help people kind of move in that direction and educate and make people more aware, give stuff out, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, so that's a thought too. So, John.
I had a question about the name of the ordinance, where it is. Would you mind going back to that slide, the very first one? Originally, this started out as a polystyrene ban, but now the phrase non-reusable plastics focuses on non-reusable plastics. And I wonder if we don't want to, is the goal here to ban plastics that aren't going to be reused or can't degrade, or is the goal to reuse more generally? So if I had ceramics items that could, or metal items. So to me, the name kind of focuses too much on non-reusable plastics,
Right.
where that's not really the...
Right. So if we do switch to this concept of reuse, then reuse is very broad, and it really gets targets all disposables and not just plastics. So that's a great point, and I think we'll continue to work on the title. So
My other question was about composting being in the climate action plan.
Yeah.
If it's coming down the pike, is it something that we want to see included there? If there are ordinances that are going to be pushing us in that direction, if we're kind of going to have to be working on it anyway?
I can't remember if I put that in there or not. I know it was in there at one point or another. I'll make sure it's in there, because I think I may have intentionally taken it out, but I can't remember why at the moment. So, but yeah, that's a good point.
And then my third comment was about reuse being defined as only at the restaurant.
Right.
There's no guarantee that they're going to be reusing it just because they have to keep it. And just in the same way that there's no guarantee that someone won't reuse it if they take it home.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, is there an enforcement piece that needs to be added to make sure that that's true? Otherwise, I guess I don't see why reuse has to be defined as being reused at the restaurant, unless I'm missing something.
So, state your question again. I'm not sure that I understand the. Yeah.
You
state it
said
again.
on one of the slides that reuse was defined
Yep.
as reuse at the restaurant.
Yep.
And the reason seemed to be because there will be some way that you could ensure that they were actually reusing it at the restaurant.
On site, right.
Right. But I didn't see anything in what was written that could ensure that they were actually reusing it. So they could just chuck it in the trash too. It could still, But the flip side is that if I take a reusable thing home, I might actually reuse it.
Right.
But there's no enforcement on either side to ensure that that happens. So I guess I don't see why it has to be defined as on-site yet, unless there is an enforcement piece that makes sure that that's necessary, unless I'm missing a piece somewhere.
It would seem like enforcement would be, I don't want to say easy, but easier at businesses and impossible at homes. I think there could be some mechanisms to do enforcement at businesses,
Yeah, we
restaurants.
would definitely be focused on the business. And so I think the idea there is that you have kind of ceramic or plastic plates that you reuse and wash on site. And so that is distinct from having a glass that you might buy that you could potentially take home with you and reuse. Like, I could use any cup again. Like, if I went to McDonald's, I could probably use their paper cup once or twice. So that's what I wanted to make sure that we were eliminating, was that if some restaurant had a fairly nice, substantial plastic cup that could potentially be rinsed and reused while you were at home, then that's not quite what we're looking for either. So
I agree with Chair Clark that it is easier to enforce at a restaurant, but if I have a nice plastic cup that I use at that restaurant, there's no guarantee unless it's enforced that I'm actually going to reuse it versus recycle it versus how.
But it never leaves the restaurant.
Well, what would prevent them from throwing it in the trash, per se?
I suppose they could, but you're not going to throw a mug in the trash usually, or a glass cup, or,
Well, it's just a.
unless it's an accident. I mean, I'm sure that stuff gets thrown away, but.
Well,
yeah.
I guess I don't see what the point of it could happen, you know.
Yeah.
If you're thinking about just sort of a flimsy plastic container, you know, that you get 50 of them, that's technically reusable. Is there any way that we're ensuring that it's actually being reused? That was my only point. And I'm putting it out there as something for you to think about more. Not
I'll
as-
think about it more. I'm not sure that I understand the scenario, so we'll look at that. Lonnie, yeah.
This kind of goes along with what you're saying. DWA has a very similar problem. They have, you know, these really nice blue bottles that are meant to be reused, and people take them and they, guess what? Half of them go in the garbage can. The garbage can that's like 10 feet away from the booth. And so they're in a similar sort of quandary as to, you know, what do they do? Because now they're giving people plastic that's not recyclable plastic. It's not a 1 or a 2. And, you know, people don't use it the way they have intended it to be used. That doesn't answer the question.
Yeah, so.
But I want to say one thing, and that's
Yeah, go ahead.
I love the phased approach. I've seen this before. I think it's really, it gives us all guidance. And the last thing I want to say is that as I'm looking at all the plastic that comes into my house, which is inevitable, I mean, our world, we really are full of plastic. But I'm looking at the bottoms, and more things that didn't used to be in recyclable plastic before are now in 1s and 2s. I mean, some of, you know, like there's containers you get potato salad at Ralph's. It's a 1. It's a beautiful clear plastic. I was thinking, oh yeah, wash this out, I'll take it back in for my, you know, takeout, whatever. And that's the other thing that doesn't really work in with this, is that the people coming back with, you know, takeout food that you want to.
So that's still in there.
Okay, it is?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's still in there. It's the requirement that you allow that unless
Okay, that's good.
it violates health code.
That's okay.
So, yeah, so that's in there. Okay, so I'm going to move forward in this direction, assuming no objections, and I'll come back to you at the next meeting with the draft text. And I'll probably share it with at the next Scour meeting first, and then we'll bring it back to the commission. So then, if we're on that track, then what I'm going to do is another thing that I've gotten a lot of feedback from our consultant on is outreach. So what I'd like to do is move forward with more outreach, try to have some meetings with the Chamber of Commerce, the hospitality group again, see if they will host a meeting for me, and see where we can move on this. So again, I think the biggest challenges are going to be the fast food restaurants and smaller establishments, and so that's my concern, is that I want to make sure that we've got answers for those folks and help for those folks, and to move them forward in this direction. So, and I think the biggest problem is going to be cups. So that's where we are. So
Thank you for the summary. Could you send the charts out to us?
the charts.
Those charts?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. So the next item under old business is the student representative update. We've talked about that for the last couple of meetings, and
Right.
Patrick has been doing some investigating.
So, quick update on that. I had developed the form to get our student representative. I had developed the letter. I was working with the Parks and Recreation Commission rep, Cynthia, to get her input and to get a student rep for her. And then we basically found out that only one commission is authorized to have a student representative, and that is the Parks and Rec Commission, and that it is a topic which will be addressed by the next council. So that is my understanding. So
That's interesting, because we've
Yeah.
had a student rep in the
I know, I
past.
was very surprised to hear that. So, yeah, so I don't really understand anything more than that, but basically I was told that will be decided by the next council.
So,
Because it is a topic apparently that has been brought up by others, so.
yeah, there was a discussion at a recent council meeting about broadening the
Yeah.
the
Representation.
the representation on commissions.
Yep.
Okay. The next item is the fountain grass eradication update, and Patrick has had some discussions with Stacy.
Yes, so I spoke with Stacy Schaefer, our head of maintenance of facilities, and she did indicate that we do not plant fountain grass on city property. There were, I think, some exceptions for the median here on Tockwitz based on input from the tribe. So I believe that if there is some in that median, then it was based on the direction from the tribe. And so that is, I think, the only place that we as the city may have planted fountain grass. So it is her policy not to do it at all. So
Is I think it's the Wellness Park over by the hospital? Is that city property?
it is, I think.
I could have sworn that I saw fountain grass there, but I might have been
It may
wrong.
be the okay kind.
Oh, there's good fountain grass?
Yes,
and
there's good fountain
bad
grass and there's bad fountain grass. So there's actually 3 different types of good fountain grass.
Got
Or
it.
not, I would say not bad fountain grass. So, yeah, it's tricky because 2 of them look fairly similar.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay.
So is there anything else that we can do with regard to fountain grass now?
Right, so I don't think there is from a city perspective unless there is some desire to have some broader removal initiative, which would probably go beyond what the city can do. So,
And there's been some ad hoc removal discussions about fountain grass in Oswald Canyon. We were going to do it last year, and it turns out it was like April or May, and that was right in the middle of the lambing season, so we held it off. But it was just a grassroots, get up there and fill up bags. So I don't know what the city feels about that, but it was discussed with Jane and the gal and the guy and the group. So.
And that's something that would just take some organization to actually happen.
right.
Yeah, if something like that were to happen, could the city provide a dumpster or something, or?
Yeah, we could probably figure out some
Okay.
cooperative approach to that.
Commissioner Miller?
As far as fountain grass is concerned, when we go through the meeting there, I have an opportunity for an educational piece that would point right at fountain grass and say, bad juju. So,
Okay.
I'll update you on that.
Isn't, in terms of a dumpster or something, doesn't it have to be put in a black bag and
It
so
has to be
dies?
bagged a certain way, I think, is
It's
what we
gotta be to
right,
get rid of it?
reported. Yeah.
You have to get us to dry out
Kind of pick up.
for some period of time.
2 weeks or something like that, is
Yeah.
that what I recall?
And then in terms of education, if, just getting information out in terms of a pamphlet or something, Tracy Albrecht was asking what the update was, so I don't know how I can tell her, is there anything that we could do with the community to keep spreading this information?
Well, certainly one thing we could do is we could make a fact sheet on it and have that at our tabling events, because, you're at the farmer's market every week, or once a month, and then we're going to have lots of events coming up here, especially in the new year. So we could certainly make a sheet for that and have some information handed out. We could do, it's probably makes sense for us to think about some sort of a sustainability message or newsletter that might come out at the beginning of the year, or certainly around Earth Day, that we could include lots of different topics, and that could be one. So we talked about doing something on recycling, and so anyway, so I think that might be a good idea to have some broader messaging campaign that goes out in the spring. So
And
we could include that.
As far as outreach to the public about the eradication of the fountain grass, could we work with the Master Gardener program here in the desert?
I think, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I know
it's
you
the-
probably want to.
Yeah, there's some overlap there,
Yeah.
but the Desert Horticultural Society does have a flyer already.
Yeah.
And there are people in the Desert Horticultural Society who are in the Master Gardener program as well. And I've had some discussions with Tracy Merrigan about that also. I do have copies of the flyer. So, we may circle back and talk to her again.
Yeah, I think we need to give people resources to go to do that removal, because I think it is a little complicated. So we want to make sure that they're doing it in the right way and not just spreading it around.
With the help of the how to get rid of it if you had it, we had some really large planters on our property with fountain grass. So following their recommendations and the, bagging it in the black bag, and today we actually had it removed from the property. And the ground crew was, I stayed with them the whole time. It was like, this bag cannot be split, and this is what you have to do with it. But even the fact that it was in a container, taking it out, the root system was massive. It went all the way. I mean, the pots were, say, yay deep. So even when the above-ground plants were gone, the root system was thriving, and if it hadn't have been potted, I'm sure those roots would have. It was very intimidating to see that, but it's a survival. Yeah, but the root system is massive.
Probably like a lot of desert plants, that they seek water so the roots grow deep. That's true with milkweed, desert milkweed.
Yeah, all the soil had to be disposed of. We couldn't keep it.
Okay.
So the next item is community garden naming plan and plaque text.
Yep. So we are moving forward with renaming the community garden after Michelle Mycian, who was the former sustainability manager. It will happen on December 19th, which is a Thursday around lunchtime, so between 11:30 and probably 1 o'clock. We're going to have the naming ceremony from about 11:30 to 12, and then we'll have a reception afterwards at Demuth Center. We got confirmation today that we can have a room there, so we can move the reception inside, and so we'll have some food. Her mother is coming out, and I believe her brother is coming too. So her family will be there, and then we'll send messages out to various networks, including, I think, her Facebook page, which is still up. Anyway, so we'll get the word out, and I expect we would have at least 50 people or so there. Yep. We'll send out an invite. So plan to be there if you can. Again, about 11:30 on December 19th. I just wanted to. What we're going to do is have a plaque that will go on the outside of the community center. Dan and I were there today to check it out, to see what it looked like. There's clearly some need for a refresh, so we put a list together for maintenance. We're going to send a note out to the people who have plots there now to clean them out and or plant something before early December. If they haven't done it by then, we will do it, and we'll take care of it and make sure that it's spruced up before that event. Other than that, if you've got any comments on the plaque text, let me know right now, because we got to get that order in. So
I think it looks great.
Okay. All right. Great. And the other thing I'll do is I'll make sure that we reach out to a few folks to see if anybody wants to have some comments, like people that used to work with her, et cetera. So we'll get that all set up. Okay.
The other thing with regard to the ceremony and is that we're going to plant the trees at that time. And at the last meeting, we had a discussion about the types of trees, and Jennifer had suggested some different types of fruit trees, and I think the action was to talk to arborist or master gardener to confirm the best types of trees to plant.
Is there going to be one tree or all of the trees that we wanted to plant for Arbor Day?
I think you had suggested like 3 or 4 trees.
Yeah,
and
I think we have room for maybe 3 trees, but that's probably it. So that's probably the most that we can handle, and we don't have any irrigation set up there.
And that was something that we were going to.
Yes, so that's something we would be challenged, we need to do. So we'd have to figure out a way. We'll check with maintenance to see if they could do it in time. There is one tree there that we could probably replace. It's this little tiny citrus tree that's not thriving.
Mm-hmm.
So we could probably replace that one, and that would have some. And so maybe we do something symbolic to plant that tree and say that 2 more are coming or something like that. Yeah.
So the fig trees, it sounds like, are really viable as well. What's that? Well,
We'll get the water there.
Yeah.
So I think it's just a matter of figuring out how whether or not we can get it there in time for the ceremony. And if we can't, then what we'll do is we'll just replace that one citrus one, and that has irrigation already. So, yeah.
And
So
then
we'll
we'll-
do that symbolically, and then we'll add the other two later.
With the tree that they cautioned us, make sure you get it in the ground now so it can be established in time for Arbor Day, because it's going to be too late and it could be too traumatic for the tree.
Right, we'll do it in December. So, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, these were actually last year's Arbor Day trees.
Right, exactly. Our last year Arbor Day commitment.
So it was also recommended that if we do plant citrus, to have it not cultivated here, where there are the disease-ridden citrus. So, and Sandra's family has recommendations that they can, give us good growers that we can purchase from.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But they had commented that any citrus in the state of California is subject to that. So even if you go to the nursery section at Home Depot, those trees are okay, any citrus, but you can't just get any old citrus, and it can't be from a crop because they have not got a grip on this yet. So, but the state has taken it very seriously, so you just have to be very careful. So there is an issue about it, but as long as it's coming from good stock that hasn't been exposed, you're okay.
Okay. So I guess my request on this front is somebody get me a specific recommendation on a tree to buy before December 19th so that we can have that ready to go.
And then
So-
city staff will take care of it.
And city staff will take care of getting it and planting.
Their other question, that we were working on this, and it was a little problematic because they were involved with the fires and things like that. But they had said that they would be more than happy to make recommendations of where to buy them from, and people to do it here in the desert if you needed it, and they'd be more than happy to help in any way they can, and they're very excited about what's going on here. So.
Okay. All right.
So how do we make that happen? I think the goal is to have at least one tree by a month from today.
It's just we spoke right before I came over today, and they said that they could have written recommendations and all of that over the weekend. So by right after Thanksgiving or before that, we'll have that information and ready to go.
Okay, that'd be great if you could get it to Dan and Patrick
Okay.
by then. Terrific. Thank you. See, the next item is leaf blower ban enforcement enhancements. We're getting to be experts on enforcement.
My favorite, yeah, exactly, my favorite topic. All right, so I wanted to convey the level of frustration by some of the members in our community about the ongoing use of gasoline-powered leaf blowers. So I hear them, and I share their frustration. So I wanted to let you know, I think I said this at the last meeting, but we're continuing to send letters to places that we are reported to us as being in violation. So we're sending letters to the homeowners. And I've gotten really good responses over the past month to those. So lots of people have called me back and said, yes, I talked to my gardener. He will never do that again. And some of them were surprised because they thought their gardener had converted, and they only to find out that their staff had not converted, even though the owner thought that they converted. So anyway, there's a lot of that happening. We did have several small victories recently in terms of issuing citations, but as was pointed out to me, one of the things that we need to get better at the city level is making sure that people pay their fines, and number two is following up on their business license status. So whenever somebody gets reported to me, I check to see if they've got a business license and then report it to the business license folks so that they can do an investigation, but we never hear back. So anyway, so what we want to do is do a more active enforcement, broader enforcement effort when we do find these violations. So I wanted to propose that three things to enhance our enforcement efforts and just kind of get your buy-in on that. One is We are proposing to increase the fines to $500 for a first offense, and then I'll work with code enforcement to see if we go up from there as we do with the other violations. So maybe it's $500, $1,000, and $1,500 for like the third, which would be much more than the cost of a new leaf blower. Second thing is provide an option for citing the homeowner. So LA has this clause in their ordinance where if a homeowner is knowledgeable about the use of the gas blower, then they are subject to a fine. I think this is more about awareness raising and attention getting than it is enforcement. So I put this statement into the letters, and after I did that, I got a lot more responses. So even having this as a notion in the ordinance, I think will be effective. And then adding temporary supplemental enforcement staffing. I think this is key. Again, the response times are hard because it's usually the last thing that the gardener is doing on the property. So they're gone in 5 minutes. And so having more enforcement, somebody else enforcing out there just driving around. And this would be a just driving around sort of enforcement effort. Because otherwise you just don't see them. So anyway, so those are the three things that I'm putting forward, and I've been talking to code enforcement about, and then so I just wanted to just see if you guys had any objections, any other questions about that, about those ideas. So yeah.
Has there been an outreach effort to HOA management companies?
Yes, so we've reached out to everybody. Yes. And we've had very few, actually, a much smaller number of HOA complaints than we had 6 months ago. So I think that the HOAs are pretty much in compliance. And usually when I do call them, I get the, oh my God, I thought we took care of this 3 months ago. So they are very responsive, and they take care of it immediately. So.
And do you prefer to work with the management company or
Yes.
with the homeowners
The
association?
management company is usually the one that takes the action, and it's the property management company, not the financial management company. So usually what I do is if it's an HOA, usually there is some listing there for a contact, and so I'll contact that person and either get the name of the maintenance company or management company, or they'll tell me who to talk to. So, yeah.
I want to share my frustration because I've spent 3 times I've told my gardener, don't do this. So I have actual knowledge that my gardener is, well, his staff is showing up with a very noisy, polluting leaf blower, and I have to run out in Spanish and say, don't do that anymore. Right. So I support finding or potentially finding the homeowner, but hopefully there'll be some discretion, because what happens if the homeowner is, taking all the action to stop that and short of firing my gardener, which I very well may get to because he's on probation. Right. If somebody from code enforcement had been driving by my house last week, if I hadn't been around, notwithstanding all of the warnings, I could have gotten cited, and the
Right.
person got cited. So yes, we have to go there, but a lot of this, I think, I don't think I'm alone of having gardeners do things notwithstanding A, knowledge, and B, even clear instructions from the homeowners. You can't do that.
Right. Good point. Thank you.
I had a similar thought, maybe not quite as concrete, but I was wondering, what does awareness mean in terms of the homeowner?
Yeah, that's a good question.
The way the vacation rental ordinance works is you know the address of the person who's staying at the house, and they will send the citation to them first. And if they don't respond, then they respond to the homeowner. So some mechanism of that sort, might help with the level of awareness in some way. Just a thought.
Yeah, so we'll do a little more research in terms of how it's worded, especially in the LA ordinance, and that definition of knowledge. I think that's a key piece. So I'm sure our lawyers will have some input there.
I particularly like the third item, adding supplemental enforcement.
Yeah.
I think probably.
I think that's the only way it's going to work.
Based upon complaints you've gotten so far, you probably have good ideas of neighborhoods where this is happening, and so having enforcement patrols
Right.
in unmarked cars, they would know where to go and perhaps at what time.
Right.
There's a neighbor across from me that the gardener is usually there about the same time every morning. I haven't heard the gas blower, but I saw them standing in the street getting ready to go into the backyard, and it wasn't an electric blower they
Right.
were using. So that would be a candidate
Right.
neighborhood to patrol.
Exactly. Yep.
One issue is, like, I never see my gardener. I'm always at work, so I have no idea what they do.
Then you have no knowledge. So again, I think that we would have to be careful about the way that we enforce that, and we understood that knowledge to be. And so, like, I did have a gentleman 2 weeks ago who I sent him a letter, he called me, he had a great conversation about it, talked to his gardener, sent me a letter back, basically acknowledging that he had received it, he had taken action, and so basically that would be a great approach in terms, because we would certainly notify the homeowner first before we took any enforcement action, but if they took that sort of action, then, you know, they're covered, you know, that's the kind of thing where,
So did you want some kind of vote or consensus on moving ahead with these?
Yeah, so I guess
activities?
I'd just like to know if there are any objections to moving forward and noting the questions about how we define some of this stuff. I think it is important. So, any objections? Okay. All right.
Okay.
So I will move forward with some conversations about this. The other nice thing about this is that the state did confirm with me that they are increasing the rebate levels for the electric lawn equipment at the beginning of the year. So literally, they could buy a blower for 25% of its retail price. So pretty significant.
Which is less than the $500 fine.
Right, exactly.
So,
Well, it's less than the $150 fine.
And Patrick has been working closely with Lieutenant Villegas of the city's code compliance office, and they made a presentation at the last Code Enforcement and Public Works Committee meeting. We generally talk about leaf blower complaints at that meeting. Okay, now we move on to new business. The first item is options for interfacing with the city council, and this came about from discussions that we started last month when Christy Holstein was here, and John made a reference to that earlier in the meeting. Patrick and I have talked quite a bit about ways that we might go about doing that. I think I'll let Patrick explain the options that we've discussed.
So I believe that there are two. So the first was to create a subcommittee of the council on sustainability. So then it would be treated similarly to other subcommittees like the Business Retention Subcommittee, Homelessness, I think, has a subcommittee. So I believe it's two council members would be assigned to a subcommittee, and there are no requirements in terms of how often they meet, but any meetings that they would have would be handled similarly to like a commission meeting or something like that, where we would provide the notice, we would help develop an agenda and post the agenda, and have some recording of that meeting. There are no other members of that subcommittee other than the two council members who are members of it, but anybody could attend. So it would be an opportunity to have a more direct voice into the council, and to, depending on how regularly you wanted to meet with them, it would be, quarterly or whatever, so a regular sort of input timeframe. So that's one option. That does involve having a staff representative for that subcommittee who would staff that subcommittee just the same way we do the commissions, et cetera. So that's really the additional labor that's involved in doing that. The second thing is that, the second option is that we could just continue to maintain the liaison roles that we have established in terms of having a liaison that is focused on the Sustainability Commission. That is Christy currently, and I assume that would continue, although we'll see how that shakes out in the new commission structure or new council structure. And more actively engaged that liaison, like inviting her to meetings when we felt that that was important. Like I thought that timing of that last one was great because we could talk to them about the ordinance and the climate action plan. So when they raise issues or ideas, we can bring them in to say, okay, let's have a conversation about that. So anyway, so that is the second option. It does not require any other additional support other than getting them there to the meeting. And so getting them on the calendar and on the schedule. Yeah.
I just had a couple of comments about that, and one is that during Christie's discussion, she mentioned that she felt the liaison approach was less effective and that a subcommittee of the council was more effective. So I think that was very clarifying for me. The second piece of the puzzle, I think, which you mentioned, is additional staff time, and I'm wondering if it's logistically feasible to have the subcommittee meeting and this meeting kind of co-occur or be adjacent, such that there's not really much time added, and all the noticing and all that can happen at the same schedule. So that would minimize that piece of it.
Potentially.
So I go to many of the subcommittee meetings. Typically, they're quarterly. The problem is you have two council members that belong on many subcommittees, and it's very difficult for their timing. They try to do them at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, but it's really a difficult thing because there's so few of them and so many subcommittees that they are a part of.
I would also support having a dedicated subcommittee, because I think that gives us more visibility with council, but also more visibility with the public that this is an issue that council actually cares about, as opposed to ad hoc. And those meetings tend not to get reported back. I do believe Councilmember Holstitch did report briefly on that, but if it's a formal subcommittee, then there's a little bit more structure for the report back to council at that. And as Commissioner Baker will know from our Ethics and Transparency Task Force, that we did recommend that all subcommittees meet quarterly. And at the last meeting of the Public Integrity Subcommittee, which was created as a result of our task force recommendations, I suggested, and Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Coors agreed, that they would try to schedule for all subcommittees, standing subcommittees, quarterly meetings. So I would be timing. I agree with Commissioner Baker that there's an issue of getting council in the room, 2 members of council, but I would support A, a standing subcommittee, and B, certainly a goal hopefully achieved of quarterly meetings. Because I think, for example, all of the things that we're doing on the climate action, I have a lot of action, matters that I would love to get political feedback as to where they want to go. And it may be that they think that, we should, work on an ordinance for X, Y, and Z. But that would be that's direction that council would give, that I personally would find helpful.
Commissioner Miller.
Along the same lines, I've sometimes wondered how they define sustainability. Is it economic sustainability, or are we talking greenhouse gas emissions? I mean, I think that there's, and so when you're doing all this work and you don't really get that kind of feedback, you don't really know if you're on the right track even. Well, I mean, that's a good point, but it's just the way, I guess, I can say that I feel that as a commissioner.
One difference, I think, with this standing subcommittee would be, as compared to some of the others that are focused on just one topic, like homelessness, we probably would have more than one topic, and it might change with time as well. I'm not saying that as a plus or minus, but it's just a thought about how that might operate.
If the question's about what is sustainable and why is this city more sustainable than that city, there's a lot of factors that go into that that consideration. So right now, Vancouver is the #1 most sustainable city in North America. So there's a lot of intangibles in there. It's parking, it's density, it's air, water, those tangibles, and not just jobs, but it's the an intangible quality of life and what brings people there to visit or to live and create businesses. So it isn't just necessarily fossil fuels and, are they finite or not? Can we make more of this? Is it good for business? It's much greater than that, and I don't think that most people see it that way. They just think, can we get more of this? Like with fossil fuels, they're finite. So it's when you look at what the considerations are when they vote on why are these top 10 cities considered sustainable, what's attractive about them. There's a number of factors, and Palm Springs happens to meet a lot of those already, just culturally and in terms of our way of life here. So that gives us a good start on it, but it isn't just tangibles. It's much greater than that.
It's up to you guys.
So yeah, we've gotten quite a bit of feedback. I'm not really sure how to proceed. It might be worthwhile to have a conversation with our liaison and give her some of the feedback that we've gotten this evening.
Do you want to take a little poll of people to see how people are feeling one way or the other? I mean, we heard it from a couple of people in terms of their preference, but
Right.
I don't know that we heard from everybody.
That's a good suggestion. So maybe an indication of who would prefer looking into forming a standing subcommittee. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. I think that carries.
Yeah. All right. Okay. And actually, just curious, the two that didn't vote, any thoughts about why? Just your.
I was just hearing concern on your part about the staff time required, and so I think either one's workable based on your workload.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't feel strongly one way or the other.
Okay.
For the same reason.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. The next item under new business is the process for acting on new requests. Just a little bit of background there. As you know, mostly every meeting we have somebody speak during public comments, and people have some issue that they're concerned about. They make a suggestion or recommendation. In addition to that, people send emails and make telephone calls and make suggestions to Patrick, and I get some suggestions as well. So one thing that we've been doing as part of the agenda development process is in our draft agenda we have a parking lot which includes these items that have been brought up in various meetings or we've heard from people through phone calls and so forth, and that list is probably 12 or more items long. So in discussing that, Patrick and I both felt strongly that we should bring it up to the commission and determine what do we want to do about these things. We have a lot of them. A lot of them are good ideas, but we need to address them and determine if we should take action on some of them or table some of them or just not do some of them. So that's the purpose of the discussion tonight. And Patrick has sent out a memo and, basically suggesting that we should look at them to see if they're appropriate or have sufficient priority. And then if so, who will follow up on them? Will one of the standing committees, subcommittees, or an ad hoc committee work on them, or individuals work on them? So as you see in the agenda there's several items that have been in the parking lot, and we're listing them here tonight to talk about them and determine if we want to go forward and have somebody take some kind of action on them. Commissioner Goins?
So the thought here is to discuss this. It's a process discussion, right? How do
Yes.
these things get off the parking lot versus what stays on the parking lot?
That's right.
So it's a process discussion and a substantive discussion.
Right.
So
For
with
these
regard
items.
to these items. So yeah.
Well, I think that regarding these, this is, I'm giving my opinion, but I think the way the commission has been working seems to make a lot of sense, that we deal with a number of disparate items, and when it's time to work on them, we form ad hocs or standing subcommittees that do that work, or they get folded into the work of existing subcommittees. That seems like a very fine process to me, and items, it's just going to be the case that we can't do everything. And I think we do a good job of choosing what to take up when it's time to take it up, is my opinion.
And we have added ad hoc subcommittees to deal with some of these things that have come up. But, based upon the number of things that we have right now, we felt we should address those things specifically and see if we should go forward with them.
Right.
Right now, you
Right.
go down the line.
Yes.
So I put that street coating, so black versus gray, as a good one, as an example, more or less, because that is an idea that had been presented, and it ended up coming through to the committee, the Solar and Green Building Committee, and so we're working on some sort of a recommendation on that to the city. So that's one that came up. It's going to go to a committee, and it's going to end up as a recommendation to the city, I think.
Maybe,
Or is it-
maybe not. I've done
Okay,
some
all
research
right.
on that.
Okay,
But
all right, good.
comment on the process, it seems
Yeah.
like going through these, and if, each one, if you could come up with 2 or 3 people that want to champion these, maybe that's a way to include them. But I did some more research on this, and the city and county of LA is spending millions of dollars to coat all their streets white. They're sold on the idea. Lawrence Berkeley National Labs has a whole section dedicated to heat islands, urban heat islands. However, the city of Tucson just went out with a bunch of thermometers and said, well, the street is in fact cool, but all the people are hot because it's reflecting. So what I thought was a slam dunk now to me is like, oh, well, so
Maybe
what do
not, yeah.
what do we do?
Yeah.
We could do a little parking lot and
Yeah.
test it out.
Yeah, I was going to say, so I think one of the potential answers here too is we need to understand what this is, because there's very little detail here on something. So it's really just a matter of, does this seem to make sense to us at all? And if it doesn't, then that's fine. We can just say it really doesn't make sense for us as a group. But then other stuff, we might want to research a little bit more to say, okay, this seems like it might make sense. Let's take it back to the committee level or wherever to do a little research, or individually.
I would say this is a back burner item. If
Yeah.
anybody else is interested and wants to continue talking about it, they're welcome to let me know.
Okay.
But you'll still keep it in the Green Building Committee?
Yeah.
Silver and Green
Yeah,
Building
it's still-
Committee?
it's
Okay.
still there for
It'll
now.
be housed
There
there,
you
but
go.
you'll have it on the back burner. And one point that came out there, I think, is in a lot of these cases, we do need a little bit more background to some of these in order to be able to act on them, and whether that's the burden of the person who makes the request or a subcommittee, we'll have to determine that. Commissioner Goins was next.
So I'm just throwing out ideas because I think that was the point of this discussion, but street coatings and sidewalk coatings can be a walkability, urban heat island, or an air quality issue. So if it was decided that you guys had too much to do, that would be a good place for it to be, is in health and wellness, or in walkability too, would be good places for it to land potentially. Just thoughts.
And it's still questionable whether that hurts or helps walkability. The streets are cooler, but there's more reflection causing people to heat up, so. Be seen.
Commissioner Miller?
I haven't researched all of these items, but I've researched a few of them. And, yeah, we need a lot of research on them. And, it's like this one sounds like it's a case in point, just like Patrick was saying. I think it'd be a real mistake for us at this point to go in this direction. Keep it on the back burner, yes. Maybe not all of them we'd have on the back burner, but I would say, that's what I've found with so many of these, that I would never even bring it up unless I'd done some research on it. And we have people come and give their 2 cents in 3 minutes, and, they haven't done any research on it, you can tell. And so I almost feel like telling them, hey, go do some research on it and come back and talk to us.
And that's part of the process discussion that we wanted to have.
Okay, well, I would vote on on some of these, we have somebody come and present this emotional, intense argument about blah, blah, blah. And, I start looking at it online and it's like, really? I don't think so. And why do I have to do that? I'm not going to do that. I mean, I will do it, but, I think it's their responsibility, and we should give it to them. We're not the complaint board.
Just quickly going down the list, I think there's one that can be taken off because I did some research, and as best as I can tell, all fireworks, including Safe and Sane, are absolutely banned in Palm Springs. Every year, the fire department issues a press release saying "Thou shalt not." The code, I'll send you the reference. It's section 8.04510. Of the municipal code, which is one of the additions to the California Fire Code. So I think that can be taken off the list. I think I think that's done. They are absolutely banned in Palm Springs. You can check with the fire department.
Except for organized events.
Right.
So.
Except for organized events. So you're talking about basically no white party.
All fireworks.
4th of July.
4th of July. Okay.
And I think that was the intent, that it was community events.
The Indians.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I'm not the one who's going to take away fireworks on the 4th of July. So I'm not going there. So I'm not going there. But just a couple of other things. The tree inventory, for those of us who are sort of old timers on the commission, I believe there was one that Michelle had done quite a few years ago. So I would actually prioritize that for Earth Day if possible. I do think that's something that we should redo and do additional education. And the good news is that if we do that, you can include it in your GHG reduction initiatives, because we're putting trees and they're sucking up a little bit of carbon here and there. So I would definitely prioritize that on the list. The 3-4-50 campaign sounds like a good idea. Maybe partnering with Desert Healthcare District, an event at the Wellness Park.
I would suggest that you go through each of one of these and get some consensus around them. So, yeah.
Okay.
How do you want to do that?
Yeah.
Well, I think we've covered street coatings. We've touched upon tree inventory. Do we need to say anything more about that? I think particularly, is there a committee, an existing committee that would like to do that?
Walkability? Well, I mean, walking under a canopy of trees is helpful.
Microphone.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing it up. I don't know.
Jennifer and I are fine with putting tree inventory under walkability.
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot of places it could go.
It may actually come up in our walkability master plan too,
Yeah.
because,
It's also a canine health and wellness.
there you go. We love our dogs.
That sounds good. Thank you.
Also, as far as homeowners can go, a mature tree can add $3,000 to $5,000 to the value of your property.
Mm-hmm.
It's important.
Thank you. Helium, ban sale of balloons. I think we know about the worldwide helium shortage, and that's the motivation for
Right.
this.
Yes.
Commissioner Miller.
This stuff is so easy to research now with Google. It's just unbelievable. It's a pretty interesting story, but I won't spend any time of yours going through. You can go on Google yourself, but it's absolutely, as far as I'm concerned, off the list. Off the list for us, Because it's not a good way for us to use our time, given all of the things we already are doing and all the things that we want to do. And all you have to do is read online and see it's already being taken care of. We have reserves that are federally run,
So your basic point, though, is it's not a high enough priority to use staff time or commissioner time, and so we should
Much better
table
put
it.
than I said.
Isn't there just a limited number of places you can even get helium? I think I've heard that Party City was discontinuing selling helium products or helium-filled products. I only see it like at the grocery store.
You don't?
No, I see it at the grocery.
Yes,
That's like the
yes.
only place I really see helium is.
Dollar store?
The
Yeah.
Dollar Tree.
one thing that is happening is that the Festival of Lights Parade is reducing the number of the balloons from, 12 to 6 this year because of the helium shortage. Okay. Ban wood-burning fireplaces.
Yeah,
Commissioner McCann,
and I'm going to
Vice Chair.
pull this together with the street coatings. But on the wood-burning fireplaces, I question again whether it's worth our time. How many homes in Palm Springs even have them? And given our climate, how often are they used to burn wood in them? It seems to me like we're just getting down into the noise. If we were a huge metropolis, maybe, but with a city of 50,000 people, I just think this is, and I have the same reaction to the street coatings. We're a small urban area. How much area is paved, and does it actually contribute to a meaningful amount of heat generation in an urban heat island sense? If we were LA, yeah, but so there's my 2 cents on that.
Aren't wood-burning fireplaces already banned for new construction? And in most parts of the state, they are.
They're, as far as I know, they're not permitted under the new codes.
Right.
So
Most
it
of
would be
Northern
just-
California, I know you can't put it in a new house.
Yeah, no, I believe they're not allowed under the codes just because of all the other restrictions.
Pose an enforcement problem, then it.
It would be like the enforcement problem with cannabis.
Right.
You can't pinpoint where it's coming
Smell
from.
the smoke.
So,
All
so
right.
the consensus is that it's really not worth the time to deal with. The next item is ban on sulfur hexafluoride, and this is what material, it's used as an ultrasound contrast agent. And I guess my question is, and maybe Dr. Miller can answer this, is how much is used in Palm Springs?
Well,
Microphone.
sulfur hexafluoride. Oops, sorry. Thanks. SF6 is primarily used in electric transmission and distribution.
Okay.
So that is interesting. It would be a matter of the grid. So at some point, we might come back to it, but I'm not sure in what capacity.
I think this is a good example where the person who brought it up probably should have provided more background in terms
And
of where
it's
it's used.
it has a very high GWP, 24,000, and it lasts 3,200 years. It's weird, yeah, it's very weird. And it's also used in
It's used in wind
firefighting.
turbines, too.
But even given that research, it sounds like really bad stuff, but it's used, it's useful, and it wasn't, certainly on a list of what pregnant women can't come within 10 feet of. So, that's just for the same reason that helium is either off the list or pretty down low on the list, and if I never saw it again, I'd be quite happy.
And I guess this is a case too where if there was to be a ban, there would have to be an alternate material as well, and so a lot more
Yeah,
background
I
would be
just have no
needed in
idea.
order to work on this. So we'll just table this. Is that consensus?
Yeah.
Ban, we already talked about ban on fireworks, we'll finish that up. I think that the intent there was community events. Who wants to take that one on?
I repeat, so it's very similar to the street paving and the fireplaces. The amount of fireworks that are used here annually for community events is de minimis, and the effect on the environment, again, equally so.
Is it the effect on wild animals, or is it emissions, or what's?
I think the point was emissions and health impacts
Oh, okay.
and fire.
I know dogs don't like it.
I don't think that was the intent.
Yes, exactly.
Or wild animals, it's a problem for wild animals.
Yeah.
And I think this is a good example of, it being a community event. I think even if there is some pollution associated with fireworks are very important to people at certain events, and I think it would be difficult to get a consensus to eliminate the 4th of July fireworks or any other major event, so we'll table this or stand down on this. It's a consensus.
Yep.
And finally, the 3-4-50 campaign, that's explained in the memo from
What is that?
Patrick.
So it's an educational campaign that is aimed at improving health, basically to inform people about there are 3 behaviors that elevate risk for 4 chronic conditions that together cause more than 50% of deaths. So it's related to unhealthy diet, sedentary lifestyles, and tobacco use.
So when we touched upon that before, I think there was a suggestion that perhaps this could be done in conjunction with the Desert Healthcare District. I think this is an educational thing, and probably a lot of educational materials exist someplace. It's just a matter of rolling it out and informing people here. And there was a candidate that we had for the commission a few years ago who was very big on this.
Right.
He wasn't selected at the time, but he had made contacts with individuals in San Diego that were working this.
I feel like if there is a commission member or group committee that would like to take this on, I'm more than happy to let you do that. So that's all I'll say on that front.
I think it falls nicely under wellness. I'll look into it.
That'd be great, thank you.
Can anyone give us a quick update on what's happened to the tobacco initiative?
It was essentially, it's my understanding that it was essentially held until the next council.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
will likely come back.
I think I've heard it mentioned as a future council topic.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, I think that was very productive, and we'll,
Took care of a lot of problems.
that's right.
It was very helpful for me. Thank
So
you.
we'll adjust our
Inventory survival.
We'll adjust our list as appropriate, and also some of these things we'll start tracking. Then the next item then is subcommittee and commissioner reports, and so the first is solar and green building.
Okay, quickly, we had our Energy Code training session on November 6th at UCR. About 40 people attended, which was a good turnout, one of our higher ones. And we got a lot of good feedback, and there were materials that were sent to everybody. DVBA essentially did all the work and sent everybody there. This is probably the last. I've done 3 of them now. The new code, as I said, is being worked on. It's getting super, super complicated. So the advantage of this one is that Energy Code ACE, it was literally plug and play. Guy showed up, did his, had his slides, answered questions. And if there's another one, it would probably be essentially 3 years from now, just right before the code goes into effect. These are the changes kind of thing, because that, I think, is of the 3 of them, this, I think, was the most useful for people. Also because I just don't think they're paying attention until roughly,
they have to.
6 weeks before the code goes into effect. So, good event, 0 cost to the commission. We got credit for everything. Patrick did the introduction, but I think we're done on that. That being said, I will continue to follow the 2022 code as it works through the commission and report back on that and see if there's any, potential action that the city could take. But as indicated in the memo, I think the best is let the state sort of lead the way. Unless we get political direction to take any action before then, I continue to think that that's what Patrick wrote, is that let the state move forward on this. It's super complicated. And I'm just not sure we have the bandwidth in Palm Springs to do anything. specifically. Also, as Patrick noted, the solar zoning ordinance was finally approved after roughly a year and a half, but I'm glad that was done unanimous this time, essentially no questions. And the building codes, the energy code and the rest of the building codes will presumably be before council on the 18th, on December 18th. And Patrick's done sort of a draft staff report, and that will explain to the new council, this is where the solar requirement goes into effect for all new residential construction. So I'm working with Patrick on sort of the explanation to council of new council of what that's been doing. And we'll continue to work at Solar Green Building on the requirement for GHG-free use for commercial buildings. I think that's one of our main sort of deliverables for the next couple of months. And that's it, unless Commissioner Flanagan has anything else to add.
Thank you. The next item is the Standing Subcommittee on Waste Reduction.
So just quickly, we talked about the plastics ordinance. The only thing I will mention is that we do a website update. So we updated all the recycling and waste management information on the city's website. And so hopefully it's a little clearer in terms of its organization, and the content there was much simplified. So again, hopefully that's more helpful for folks to find the information that they're looking for. We are continuing to move forward on our pilot with the Cultural Center and our work on public spaces and our signage and all that. So the downtown trash cans will be installed in December, so they might start to get installed before our next meeting. And so we're working on the signage associated with that. So that's kind of where we are on the waste recycling front.
Thank you. The next is Standing Subcommittee on World Environment Day.
We had planned to meet before this meeting, and Greg remembered that now we are a standing subcommittee, and so because of the Brown Act, we needed to post this and create an agenda. So Sandra and I met, and we've created an agenda, and our first meeting will be on December 2nd at 9 a.m.
And you work with Dan on getting an agenda out?
Yeah, he has it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And the next is Standing Subcommittee on Water Conservation.
All right, quickly, and then I'll add that Commissioner Miller can add a few things. So we're working with Patrick on the city's turf conversion project, which would be Victoria Park and the airport, and we're going to have a special meeting probably on Monday afternoon to advance some of those discussions. And Commissioner Miller's working on a proposal to restrict weed barriers on city projects, and that would come first to our committee, and then that would be a proposal that we'll bring back to the full commission. This morning's DWA board meeting, a lengthy discussion and the board approved an updated exchange agreement with Metropolitan Water District. This new agreement runs until 2035, and this is the agreement that allows DWA to exchange its share of state water project water from Northern California with Met's share of Colorado River water, which runs through the aqueduct, and there's a turnout right in the mountains and then comes to the percolating pond. So very important agreement. Without going into details, it's the DWA folks along with CWD are very happy because they think that it gives them more flexibility and, most importantly, reliability of their water for the next 15 years or so. Continuing to have good news on water reduction. The latest is 11.5% reduction in October from the 2013 baseline, and cumulative savings over the last 12-month period is 19.4%, and cumulative savings since June of 2016, when DWA put its 10 to 13% target in, is 17.4%. So way over target. Is roughly, I think permanently, the folks here in Palm Springs and the areas of THS and Cat City have essentially reduced water consumption by roughly a sixth. So that's good news, and we're working, of course, to continue to get that lower.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. So you mentioned, the turf removal. So basically, this has evolved into a very collaborative project, which is going to include a couple of master gardeners, and probably including Dr. Cameron Barrows, who does landscaping based on an ecosystem sort of image, view. And it's going to be a demonstration garden, an example of sustainability in the form of a garden. So that fits in with Ashley Metzger and DWA's whole turf removal, desert landscaping, desert irrigation for water conservation. Weed barrier is now going to be finally addressed publicly. The DWA gave up their insistence that people had to sign up for weed barrier in order to get a rebate, which they stopped doing back in 2016 and haven't done it since. But that's all good news, although that's not true down on the other end of the valley. I won't get into weed barrier now. That's another whole conversation. But we'll have planting for pollinators. We'll certainly won't be using fountain grass, and they will have signage to discuss that further. Hopefully, we won't have to use any herbicides or insecticides, and we will explain why. And of course, all native plants, probably solar lighting, that is the question mark. In any event, we have a lot of money for it, and when we get rid of the weed barrier, that means that our budget just expanded incredibly, because weed barrier is so expensive between the product and the landscaper that's putting it in. It really ups the price of landscaping. So we'll have more money to do a really nice job and have some nice signage. But we're still waiting on input between the city and the airport, and we'll get it. And I've already talked to a couple of landscape people. Ashley Metzger wants to be involved in terms of, what kind of irrigation could be used. And so I'll have more information on our next meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Then we move on to Ad Hoc Subcommittee on Earth Day. Commissioner Baker.
Yes, the Ad Hoc Subcommittee, yours truly, met with Patrick on November 4th to discuss the planning for Earth Day, April 22nd, 2020. We reached out to Digicom, haven't heard back from them yet. Reached out to Desert Learning Academy. They have nothing scheduled. They just said basically there was no interest on them. Patrick's going to reach out to Kim Floyd at Sierra Club. And also I need to check up with Roy and 1PS to see what can be done from that group.
I've gotten some preliminary interest from some
Great.
individuals in terms of heading that up, so we can talk about that separately.
Okay, and then the last part is to get in touch with the school district to see if there's something that the school district may be interested in joining us, or if they have anything planned themselves. Basically, it's just an educational awareness type of event day.
Thank you. Ad Hoc Subcommittee on Walkability and Pedestrian Planning.
I am super excited to report that yesterday we had our interviews for the consultant for the Walkability Master Plan. So we were all in agreement, and so that firm should be notified very soon and hopefully get started in December. So it will be a fast and furious process. And so, again, I'm hoping that they get on board in December so that they can start planning events in January, February, March timeframe. So that's all I have to say on that.
That's a major milestone.
Major.
Yes.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. The next is Ad Hoc Subcommittee on Crosswalks and Pedestrian Safety. I'll report on that because this is one that was created to really branch out between the Commission and the Code Enforcement and Public Works Committee, which is a committee of 1PS. That committee has done a lot of pedestrian and bicyclist safety projects in the past. We did have a discussion about that at our last Code Enforcement and Public Works Committee meeting 2 weeks ago. And basically what's happened is that the Warm Sands neighborhood, I guess actually it was you, John, that submitted a proposal for a traffic calming project. That project has been received and initiated, and Francisco has started to do some investigation work on that. So my original plan with this was rather grandiose, and thinking that we'd look at sidewalks and crosswalks across the city. It seems to make sense to focus on this project first, and then as we get some results, perhaps expand and start looking at crosswalks elsewhere in the city. One thing at the Code Enforcement and Public Works Committee meeting recently is Joel Montalvo did talk about some of the criteria that are used for determining where crosswalks can be placed, some of the practical problems, and also there was a representative from Warm Sands there, and he requested that we dig up the history of the addition of the traffic signal on Sunrise going into the same shopping center. So that's information that could be useful as we proceed. So we're focusing on the particular project that's been brought up, but we'll broaden as we go along. Yes, sir.
I'll just add a couple of things too. I know that that project it relates to the Sustainability Commission potentially, in that it could that corridor could be one area that's looked at in our walkability plan that's happening. And I know the city staff is working on how to actually figure out where that project should go, who should work on it, and that should happen within the next 2 weeks here. So it's kind of becoming a fun little test case to see where that's going to go and how it's going to work out.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
And can I add one more thing?
Sure.
I forget how I got on this, but I know this is one of my pet peeves, is the fact that we still have push-to-walk buttons on our high pedestrian streets, like Indian Canyon and Palm Canyon. Those buttons are not found on big cities with high-density walks, and I think it causes confusion, and I think it's a public safety issue, but I don't know if that has any legs to it, or the city didn't seem to have any issues with it.
You mean just at the streetlights?
So what happens is, in a big city, you get to a corner, there's not you don't have to push a button to cross the street. It just automatically assumes there's pedestrians there, and it has a green walk to go. Mm-hmm. So people that come from big cities come to Palm Springs, and they stand there, and they don't push the button, and then it's red, and the traffic starts going, and then they get confused, and then midway through the cycle, they run across, because they don't have buttons, so they're not used to it. So to me, getting rid of all the push-to-cross buttons on Indian Canyon and Palm Canyon while we're redoing it would make sense, because there's a lot of people, a lot of pedestrians on those streets.
So just to clarify, it's when the light looks like you should be able to walk.
Right, it'll have a green light for cars, but it'll say don't walk for people.
Got it.
For some reason.
Yes, that has confused me in the past too.
Right, and I've seen lots of tourists, wait and wait and wait, and then run across in the middle of the street when the lights turn. I don't understand why we have them in Palm Springs.
As a downtown pedestrian, I will say that this is the only city I've ever been where those buttons mean something. And I think, or at least my assumption was, because it's so hot here, that just standing for a few minutes, and because there isn't a lot of pedestrian traffic, but they're very responsive. So I think without them, and just having it on a timer, but they actually work. And if you press it, you're going to get your walk light.
Well, yeah, so what you would do without them is you would just always assume there's pedestrians there. And I disagree with you. There is high pedestrian traffic on Palm Canyon and Indian Canyon. That's what I'm talking about.
Well, I mean, compared to someplace really dense like downtown LA or something. But I am one of those pedestrians, but they do work. They do work. Otherwise, if you don't press, and I've had people joke about it, and I was like, press the button, it turns, and they were like, they actually work here. And I was like, yeah, they do. That's
she's
just
saying
my
not when they're
personal
cars, so there are no cars triggering the light to change. So if you're on Sunrise, which is a major artery, the light will stay green until a car comes.
It's a different issue. Yeah. So it's not that those aren't great, and it's nice to have those, especially when there's not a lot happening and you need to get across. But it's rather when the light in front of you is green and it looks like you should walk across the street, but the walk sign hasn't changed yet. And so it's the fact that those two things are not always in sync. And so the proposal, I believe, is to make sure that always that when it's green, the little Walkman is walking as opposed to the stop, telling you to stop. So that's, okay. You can use that terminology too.
Sum it up, but I'm used in San
But no,
Francisco and Portland.
our buttons are
That's the way it
awesome.
is.
Yes, I will.
And
I
it's
will
not
reaffirm
in
that.
here. I mean, in all big cities, that's the way it
Most
works.
cities do
Most big
that,
cities
yes,
does that,
I agree.
but it's confusing for a lot of tourists.
Because then they wait and it doesn't happen the
Right.
second time either.
So just a quick clarification question. In that situation where it's green and you do have the right of way, you're not going to get hit by anybody. Do you have to have pressed the button for the twos to sync up? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're crossing against the red and you're in violation.
Right. Exactly, and it looks like you're the one that's in the wrong because you're walking against a no walk sign, so. All right, so noted.
There is one caveat, when there is a left-hand turning lane.
Yes.
So it does say, don't walk, even
So
though
there
the light is green,
There
because
is a
cars are.
situation where that does
Right.
make sense, yes,
But on Palm and Indian, I don't think.
Yeah.
Not yet.
so.
Anyways.
Okay.
I'd like that still remain as an issue.
Hold that thought for our walkability study.
The next is the Ad Hoc Subcommittee on Bicycle Routes and Cycling.
So the only thing that's happened is we talked a little bit about the maps, and
Yes.
we're out of maps. So you sent me Patrick sent me some copies of the maps. We also wanted to look at the New York City, did a safety brochure, and I found most of the stuff in the safety brochure is in ours. It's just poorly presented. And I did a closer look, and it's on that email I sent you. There is a street that's missing in Bellardo from the map, but I'd like to get more maps printed, and I'd love to have someone kind of organize that a little bit better if we print out the maps, the safety bullets, just bullet them or something.
I would certainly look for input on that. If you have more specific suggestions for how that should be organized, we will also work with a graphic designer. So
Okay.
if we have very specific suggestions for, please make graphic references here or bulletize these things. Yeah.
Okay,
So
I
the more
mean, I said-
specific we can be, the better. Yeah.
I sent them in the email, but I didn't have specific ways to design the brochure, because
Okay.
I'm not good at
All
that,
right.
but I can try again if you
Okay.
like.
All right.
I believe that Commissioner Goins did a lot of work on that map with one of the other commissioners when he first came on. So there may be rationale for where things are placed on that map and that, so I would certainly check in with.
All the information's on there, there's a limited amount of room, so.
And I do still have maps, but so if
Oh,
you
is
need
there?
some more somewhere, then
They
let
said
me
they're
know.
out up at the front desk.
Oh, I
Okay.
can get them.
Great.
Okay.
Ad Hoc Subcommittee on Night Sky.
I've got nothing.
Yeah, I don't either as well.
Did you? I'm sorry. Did you guys know that there is a night sky ordinance here in town?
There's lighting ordinance. I know there's lighting ordinance.
So it was referred to as a
There's a-
night sky ordinance by our planning director. So I was not aware that there was one, but so you might want to just check on that.
We will check on it.
Yeah.
And whatever it is, as I was going along Talkeets Canyon last night and seeing these incredibly bright up lights to illuminate the trees there, whatever it is not very good.
And actually, I went to an event a week and a half ago, and I noticed that at the very end of Ramon, where Ramon butts up to the city, someone had uplit all the mountains, which I believe it's Indian land, and it's wildlife problems. I don't know who did it.
So it's the tennis club, something with the tennis club. Yeah, it is always up there.
Yeah, it's on the I mean, I think that doesn't look good, but
Yeah, I'm not sure where that came from, but yeah, it's traditionally happened. So I'm looking forward to your recommendations on that front.
Yes.
Is the issue just nighttime lighting, or is it nighttime lighting after 10 p.m.? I mean, there is something to say about the architectural look when you're coming into the city with the tree-lined palm trees till, say, 10 or midnight, and then
That's
functionality.
That's an issue, and it could be an issue both for residential and commercial, is do we want to go for curfews? Yeah.
and there's three things. So it's the color of the light, it's the time of the light, and it's the levels of the light. So if you light a tree up with 150 lumens, great. You don't need 1,500 lumens, you don't need blue light. So all three of those things are where we're headed. It's just a question of how best to enforce it, is what Robert and I are working on.
The next item is bighorn sheep habitat protection. I think Patrick has some updates there.
So I was informed that the signage, one of the fixes was made, and so that's great. Apparently, the other one was not, so I'll follow up on that with regard to the signage. The other thing is I do have, apparently there was some negotiation with the Convention and Visitors Bureau that we would post hiking trail signs on major streets to direct people to where to go. And so I have those signs. I had no idea what to do with them. And so that was clarified for me last week. And so I need to connect with the Convention and Visitors Bureau to get them to them, basically. So that's happening too.
So we would love to get, I know, and thank you for getting Mesquite bolted down, and they removed the dog waste stations, which is great. But the biggest trail is South Licking Trail, and we love to get our rangers out there to educate people before Thanksgiving. So if we could get that one sign bolted up by the end of this week.
So do you have a curriculum for them yet?
And no, we've got the handouts, and it's so we have a ranger education program, and we're not enforcing the ordinance. What we're doing is educating people. So the biggest thing we have is we have the handouts. The handouts have FAQs, and they have information about why this is being done and what are the reasons for it. And most of the curriculum will come from that. So we're going to start. Once we have the signs up and we can start meeting to develop our curricula, we can.
Is that in an email that the city hasn't looked at yet?
Do you need a training curricula for the?
I think we'd at least like to review the contents of that.
Okay, well, I can write that up for you.
Okay.
And then one other thing too we had left over was the city was asked to investigate additional alternative routes for dogs walking. And as I understand it, Araby Wash is the #1 destination. At the entrance to Araby Wash, it says no pedestrians. However, it's filled with thousands of pedestrians. So I think to me, that's the opportunity that is probably can yield the most benefit if we can clarify, and I believe it's the Riverside County Water and Wastewater District that doesn't want people walking adjacent to their wash.
The levy district, I think, yeah.
However, it seems to be, I don't know, is it so many people do it? Is it legal now
I think the problem is safety, because that someone's son got drowned over at the entrance of Palm Canyon on 111. So even though it's dry 99% of the time, if the county allows you to walk in there and someone dies, then the county's liable for it. So their chances of that happening are zero.
And I think the Araby Cove neighborhood has had some concerns about parking for people that hike there. If there's going to be more activity, you probably should consult with the neighborhood organization, let them know.
Yeah, I think the entrance I was thinking of is the Toledo entrance by the stables. That's where most people go in, but yeah, so I don't know what other plans the city has for more dog walking areas, but that's the one that I seem to refer people to, so.
Okay. Thank you. And then we have wellness.
No report. Wellness will take on the 450 for next month.
Great, thanks. And finally, an update on the Desert Community Energy Community Advisory Committee meetings.
I'm filling in for David on this one since I think he's off. Anyway, I'm just going to read it. As Patrick mentioned, DCE will launch next April. The Community Advisory Committee will meet on this Thursday, and we'll be discussing outreach in connection with the launch. Katie Barrows of CVAG will join the December commission meeting for a presentation on DCE. That'll be great. The Palm Springs CAC members work together on a list of community groups that can assist Lift to Rise, which is the consulting group that we got to kind of market this to low-income folks, on its efforts to increase enrollment in care and FARA, electricity and gas low-income assistance programs. We received helpful input from City Clerk Anthony Mejia, who gave us contract information for the groups, with whom he did outreach with last year on the council districting. Commissioner Miller coordinated a comprehensive list that will be forwarded to Lift to Rise. That's it.
Thank you. So the final item on the agenda before adjournment is the commissioner comments and upcoming agenda development. So we'll go around the table as we normally do. If anybody has any additional comments or suggestions for then the agenda for the December meeting, please speak up. One thing I wanted to mention first is that, again, a reminder about the board and commissioner training on December 2nd. If you haven't, if you're intending to go, or if you haven't replied to Terry Milton, please do so. So. Vice Chairman McCann.
We are, at this point, getting close to somewhere between 750,000 and 800,000 raised for Safe Oswego Canyon, so we're still short 200,000, and we've got 5 weeks to go.
It's amazing.
Nothing? Commissioner Miller?
2 comments. The first one is when David and I were at the November 6th DWA meeting, we found out about the Palm Springs Surf Club, which you probably heard.
Thermal?
Pardon me?
Is that the one in Thermal?
No, that's the one that is taking over the,
Oh, Hacienda?
I don't know, it's down at the end of,
Oh, the
Wet
one.
one.
thank you. That it went through the Planning Commission, and it was passed by City Council. It never came here, and it never came to the DWA. So there was no water analysis done. We do know that the wave pool, remember the wave pool there? It used to require 1 million gallons to fill it, and now the surf pool will require 3 million gallons. There was an extensive analysis done on lighting, but there was no analysis whatsoever on water usage. For instance, say evaporation, given the temperature and the wind speed, how much water is actually going to be used? There was no empty or refill schedule. The Water Conservation Committee discussed this at the last meeting, at which Ashley Metzger from DWA attended it. And the consensus was that such a building request should be brought to the attention of sustainability and the Desert Water Agency before the City Council vote. For instance, the DWA work could have assisted the designers in building water-saving features, which of course they're expert in. So I wanted to put that before you to see if we can just either discuss it again or talk to whoever we need to discuss it with, certainly the Planning Commission, but also the City Council. This is a foolish way to go about putting something through that has such potential impact, especially during a drought. Any questions?
So the council already approved it, though, correct?
Yes.
So that horse is out of the stable.
It's out of the stable,
So
but
the
for future
question for
reference-
future, well, that sort of ties back into the liaison or the standing committee from the city council to work more closely with us.
Do you know the existing water park that's on Gene Autry? Is that
That's
one
the
closed?
one.
So are they replacing that? They're redoing it? Oh, okay, they're repowering it, sort of. Got it, okay. Thank you. It was closed down for a while, and they're reopening it. Got it.
Do you have anything?
No, nothing to add. Thank you.
Commissioner Goins?
I had one item, and it, at one time, had been on the back burner list, and that was an update on the cogen plant. For a while, that was a budget item in our, we paid for the cogen plant, and we were getting regular updates at one point. But I think it's still a sustainability issue and will become even more important as we do our upcoming GHG emissions work, that we kind of know what's going on with that. So I wanted to raise that issue.
And we did get an update from Stacy 2 or 3
Oh,
months ago.
Maybe I was absent from that meeting then.
Perhaps you
Oh,
were.
I see. Gotcha. All
But,
right.
but we can keep that on the list.
Yeah, because I think there will be some new developments soon, because we were sort of on the precipice of reaching some new agreements with that, so.
Next, Commissioner Garrett.
I've waived, this is the last the last sample to go into our kit, which has taken up the back of Jen's car for some bit and now is taking up a good deal of Patrick's office. It's quite large. I am very excited about the presentations to the point where it's inspiring enough that I'm thinking, I want to open a food or beverage business. Who cares what I'm serving? It's the packaging. It's very, very exciting. And this isn't a company that has brought in some green packaging. It's all they do. And they're leaders in it. It's exciting stuff. I hope everybody's got a sample of their new, the jumbo boba size straw, which will satisfy the requirements for the gourmet shakes and all of that. But it's all compostable. And they do a full range of straws. This just happens to be a better. So Patrick, when you're ready, I'm ready to go with the presentations. It's very exciting stuff and good mouthfeel. It looks good. It looks very stylish, and it's clearly marked as. Whoops. You could pass those around and make sure everybody gets them. Try them. They come in different sizes. They do different things. You can get bendy ones. They certainly do paper and things like that. But these are all renewable and compostable. They come in the dark green. You can get it wrapped, unwrapped, depending on the type of business, if you're doing a prepared drink, or if it's a takeout where you want the wrapper. But it's a great company, and they've been a wonderful resource, and it's all they do. But try the straws. They hold up on par with any heavy-duty plastic. It's not going to chip your teeth the way that plastic will sometimes if you're not paying attention and you jam your straw in. But it's great stuff. It doesn't, and even the forks and the cutlery, the plates and everything, it has a really good feel. And I can't understand why anybody would want to continue with styrofoam, which tends to break up anyway, when the alternatives are much sturdier, and you would have to really sort of make an effort to puncture them or break them, but no bad taste or anything like that. So it's very, very exciting, and the prices are not scary. In fact, I think it's negligible for the business owner.
Thank you.
I'm not an expert in restaurants, but I think typically they use a restaurant supply company, so the people that do their napkins and all that stuff, that's who really distributes the stuff to the restaurant, not the actual restaurant owner going out to Smart and Final to purchase straws and cups and stuff.
True. That is what they do, but they're completely green. They don't make other products and have brought in a green line. This is all they do. But yes, you're right. So they are a wholesale supplier, and it's not anything where you can just go to Big Lots or something like that. But it's a really, really exciting, and there's more of them. I mean, it's not just this one single company. They're one of many of this new generation of green packaging companies that are super savvy. So, and their first question was not about our recycling programs, but our composting. And I was like, that I can't tell you. And they were like, that's the biggest question, more than your recyclables, because the point is to eliminate the plastics in every case. And I think if you can get into Patrick's office, or if we can get the presentation where you can see the different categories, but I think we've satisfied every category that we needed: the cultural center, the takeout people, hot food, hot cold beverages, all of it. And as far as like with the plastic drink bottles too, it occurred to me that I've never heard anybody complain about the glass beer bottles. And of course, all beverages used to be in glass, but no one ever complains about, the glass beer bottles and why isn't it in plastic. So why have we accepted just this broad use of plastic for everything? And I think that's just something, but these companies, and they're big volume companies, so it's not obscure, kind of edge business. This is big money business, and they know it. So the future is here, and it's green.
Great. That's great information. good progress. Commissioner Futterman? Nothing? Commissioner Gauthier? Okay. Oh, one more, sorry.
This, I just would like to put this on the agenda for the next meeting. And what this is it's a collaboration of the California Association of Sanitation Agencies, which is up in Sacramento, and also it actually came from Heidi Sanborn, the executive director of the National Stewardship Action Council. It's a request for co-sponsorship of AB 1672, and it is Assembly Member Richard Bloom who is bringing this up. Wet wipe labeling. Okay, so y'all know what that's about, right? Okay. Well, it's
Sanitary wipes.
yes,
Okay,
that's
yeah.
right. Good,
Oh,
good. So one of the biggest problems in sewage treatment plants is people use these wipes and then they put them down the toilet and they flush them. And guess what? They can't even begin to handle them. They can't even tear them apart. I mean, and then to boot, and this is what the labeling law would be, is that it says on it, flushable.
Yeah.
So you go and you do your educational thing. That would be, you know, Metzger, she goes into the schools and some of the, you know, some of the students are saying, oh, but it says it's flushable. So, but it's not. And so they're trying to get the state of California to be clear about this because it is wreaking havoc with sewage treatment plants.
And domestic systems too. We had a couple plumber visits from, you know, renters that use those. It destroys your home system.
Well, I mean, I was mentioning this to my next door neighbor, and he was appalled because he does it. He does exactly that. And he came up with a, you know, a way that he could contain these wipes. And anyway, it needs to be stopped. And this is going to be part of an educational campaign that some committees, you know, I will be doing it. And and actually, the sewage treatment plant has some very clever ideas for education, which I'll go over with you on another visit.
About those wipes.
Yes.
10 years ago in New York, the cost that those were costing the city was enormous, and they couldn't, so they had to just end it. And it's a dense city, old plumbing systems,
Right.
be it private or city, and it was a monster of a problem and extraordinarily expensive. So no reason to go there. And I think, like any feminine hygiene, do not flush. Baby diapers do not flush. It's not flushable, but the cost was mind-boggling for Manhattan alone.
This is an area, like so many, that people, they think it's all being taken care of. I mean, as soon as they move that handle, it's out of their lives, you know, and so they need to be educated.
So you're requesting a presentation at the next meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. So our next meeting is going to be Tuesday, December 17th. Is there a motion to adjourn this meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
A second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 Aye.